pregnancy that captivated the nation. So I did a little bit of investigating. I saw you guys really liked my other true crime video, so I decided to do another one. And I thought that honestly this one would be perfect because of the latest news on TikTok, which I'll get into at the end of today's video. I'll be retelling the case in this video, so let's get started. Per usual, I'm looking at my computer screen, so I'll be reading from there. So, a backstory on the Anthony family. You have Cindy, George, Casey, and Kaylee. So you have 4 people. Those are the main people. So, George was the father, and he was formerly a police officer or a cop. Cindy, the mother, was a registered nurse. And they described Casey as a popular, energetic child who was very close to her mother, Cindy. In January of 2005, Casey started dating Jesse Grund. So, later that year, at age 19, Casey had become pregnant. So, basically, the father was alleged to be this boyfriend Jesse, but was later determined that it was not Jesse. So, there was no real discussion on who the father was, but it's not necessarily important. So, when Casey got pregnant, her life took a turn. On August 9th, 2005, Casey had given birth to Kaylee. On June 16th, 2008, Casey left her parents' house in Orlando, Florida. She told her mother that she was taking Kaylee to her nanny, who was also called Zanny, and that she herself, Casey, was heading to a work trip in Tampa, Florida. 30 days after Casey had left, her car was found abandoned in Orlando and was stowed away. So George and Cindy, had been notified and went to go recover the car. When they got to the car, they noticed this horrible smell, and Cindy said that it smelled like dead bodies. George was also agreeing it smelled like dead bodies. The guy who brought them, walked them to the car, smelled something. So they were like, what the heck is this smell? So when they looked in the trunk, they noticed that there was trash in the trunk. So they had ended up throwing out the trash. I don't believe they looked in the trash. I think they just threw it out. On July 15th, 2008, Cindy Anthony, so the mother, calls 911 to report Kaylee missing. She told dispatchers, "I found out that my granddaughter has been taken. She had been missing for a month." Her mother had finally admitted that she had been missing. "There is something wrong. I found my daughter's car today and it smells like there has been a dead body in the damn car." I never saw her, so saying that word was kind of like, ooh. saying damn is not in my vocabulary, so that felt wrong. That felt wrong of me. But that was a quote from Cindy. So she was kind of like, what's going on? Now I find out my granddaughter's missing and the car smells like dead bodies. Where's my granddaughter? What's going on? Kind of, So the police end up arriving to the house. Cindy, once again the mother of Casey, who was the mother of Kaylee, their names sound similar, but Cindy explains that herself, her husband George, the father, Casey, and Kaylee all reside in that house. But this was the first time in weeks that she's seen her daughter, Casey. Casey Anthony then reported that Kaylee had been abducted by a nanny named Sinead Gonzalez on June 9th, and that's who I was saying goes by Zanny. missing. Like, what's going, like, what do you mean? They were just caught off guard by it. They're like, this doesn't normally happen. Normally, parents report their kid missing pretty quickly, and they seem frantic about it, so they were kind of just like, it was a little weird, kind of suspicious, kind of like red flag, So Casey Anthony's behavior leading up to this incident raised more questions than answers. She had continued living her life as if nothing had happened. She was partying with her friends and even going out to clubs while her daughter was missing. So, like I said, it wasn't until weeks later, on July 15th of 2008, that Casey reported her daughter was missing. So, the case quickly became all over the media. It was a media sensation. Casey Anthony's lies, the inconsistencies in her story, and just her behavior that seemed very strange, became a really big focus for news outlets across the country. The public especially was outraged by the apparent lack of concern from a mother who lost her daughter. Like, her daughter was gone, allegedly kidnapped by Zenaida, but she was like chill about it. So it was just like, how as a mother are you not concerned in the slightest that your 2-year-old daughter is gone? It just didn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Like, even me researching it, it's like, how do you not? Like, how? I don't get that. I don't get that. Casey was first arrested on July 16th of 2008, which was one day after her mother, Cindy, reported Kaylee missing to the police. I guess it was Cindy and or Casey, I guess. So, she ended up being charged with child neglect, giving false statements, and obstruction. The charges resulted after Casey claimed to police she had left Kaylee at the apartment of her babysitter, Zanny, and that she worked at Universal Studios, which both statements turned out to be false. So, to go into those false statements and how they came to that, basically, Casey had explained to the detectives prior that she was an event planner at Universal Studios, and she dropped Casey, or the names get so confusing, oh my gosh, the names are so confusing. Okay. Casey explained to detectives prior that she was an event planner at Universal Studios. She had dropped Kaylee off to the nanny. And to also note that she told 2 of her coworkers at Universal Studios that she had dropped Kaylee off with the nanny as well. So they were kind of like her witnesses, right? So she dropped Kaylee off at the nanny, and when she went to pick her up at the end of the day, they were both missing. Casey said she kept trying to call the nanny's phone, but it was out of service. So she hung around the apartment to see if they'd show up. When they never showed up, she started going places that they would normally go. So, like the park or the mall, etc. She was going all over, kind of looking for them. But when she didn't find them, she just went to her boyfriend's house. Because who wouldn't do that? Who wouldn't? You know, it's like, yeah, my child, I can't get a hold of them. I guess I'm gonna go to my boyfriend's house. Obviously, it's like, oh, you just went to your boyfriend's house. Okay, mom of the year. So she went to her boyfriend's house to stay, and she didn't call the police. She said she was scared the nanny was gonna harm Kaylee. She would go on to explain that Zanny had watched Kaylee so many times before, and it was fine. So, what's there to worry about? So, detectives take Casey to the apartment where Zanny allegedly lives, right? let's go to Zanny's apartment, let's check it out. The police peek in, right, to the window. They're like, let's see inside if anyone's in. It's a vacant apartment, no furniture, nothing. It's abandoned. It's like no one's been there. So they're like, okay, this isn't really adding up. So later on, detectives end up going to the apartment manager, I think they're called, right? One of those apartment managers, and they're like, hey, so I'm looking at this apartment for Zenaida. And they're like, well, this apartment's been vacant for like a really long time, and we have no trace of this Zenaida. Like, who is this? We don't know her, you know? They're like, we don't know her. She's never lived here. Who is she? She doesn't even go here, you know? So investigators went to then track down the coworkers that Casey allegedly told about dropping Kaylee off with the nanny. And so the detective goes down without Casey to meet with the supervisor, to come to find out that Casey hasn't worked at Universal Studios in 2 years. 2 years. And the two individuals that she had named that she told were her coworkers, oh yeah, they don't work there either. So detectives were like, you know what, let's set this girl up. Like, might as well. She wants to keep lying to us. Like, let's see how she acts. Let's see how she acts when she's in the lie. So they take her, they drive her down to Universal Studios, they bring her there, and Casey starts pretending like she's worked there. She's walking around, she's saying hi to people, you know, and everyone's like, they're literally like, who is this girl? Who is this? Even like when she first got there, the guard was like, we don't have anybody employed here by the name of Casey Anthony. And she was like, no. She's like, I work here. My supervisor's name is this. His extension is this. And he's like, yeah, well, those people that you're listing also don't work here. So I really don't know what to tell you, girl. They still let her in. And this is when she's like going in and like saying hi to everybody. She's walking around like she knows where she's going. They finally get like through navigating through this like area, they get to a dead end, and that's when she's like to the detectives, yeah, I don't work here. They're like, alright, you're lying too much, and like, where's your daughter? Like, you need to be honest, like, this is crazy. They start questioning Casey, and they're like, so where's her daughter? And she's like, well, the last person that I saw her with was Zenaida. And detectives were like, girl, we've confirmed there was no trace of her at that apartment. They were like, we even pulled surveillance footage of the apartment complex that day, and there's nothing related to this apartment. Like, stop. Like, where is your daughter? Like, what's going on? Where is Kaylee? So she was like, alright, well, I really was scared of how my mom would react. And the detectives were like, so you're more scared of how your mom would react than finding your own daughter? So during the whole conversation between detectives and Casey, they noticed that she really doesn't have any sense of urgency, and they're like, this is super odd. So the police were like, alright, well, if she doesn't have any sense of urgency, then maybe she's somewhere safe, right? Because she normally, if your kid has gone missing, you're gonna be frantic and like I need to find my kid. She's kind of like chilling. So they're like, nah, she's gotta be safe. She's gotta be somewhere safe. So then they started to think like, alright, well, maybe the reason why is because Casey and Cindy seem to kind of have a toxic relationship, and so maybe Casey just doesn't want her daughter around Cindy, and so she just has her off somewhere and she's just safe, and you know, it's just kind of like whatever. So detectives asked her, like, do you just not want your daughter around your mother? And she's like, no. I left my daughter with the nanny. So she's still holding on to this story, even though detectives already told her, like, hey, we know this isn't a real thing. Like, we know you didn't drop your daughter off at this apartment with Zanny. Like, come on. And she's like, I did it. So they obviously arrest her, and not obviously, they do arrest her and charge her with child neglect. They were doing this in hopes that she would be like, oh shoot, like this is serious, and she starts telling the truth. But she doesn't tell the truth. I don't know if she ever tells the truth. I'm not sure. So Casey ended up getting allowed one phone call when she got arrested, and detectives were like, okay, let's monitor who she calls and what she talks about and whatever. So she ended up calling Cindy, where she explained they arrested her on a whim and they're blaming her for things that she would never do. Cindy was like, well, if you're not gonna tell them the truth, then what do you expect? And so she starts getting annoyed with her mother because obviously that's not what she wants to hear. And she's like, can I just have the phone number to my boyfriend Tony? Can you just give me Tony's number? So detectives are like, okay, Tony must be of significance here. Let's go to Tony's apartment. So Clint lived with Tony, and where they had shared apartments, and Tony was surprised and had no idea where Kaylee was. He's like, oh, I didn't even know she was missing. I never heard anything from Casey telling me that she was missing. So he had claimed to not know anything. Background of Casey and Tony is that they started dating at the end of 2008. Clint had explained meeting Kaylee for the first time with Tony 3 weeks after Tony and Casey started dating. Clint described Kaylee as being a cute little girl who was super intelligent, and described Casey as a very loving mother from what he had seen. In the first couple months of Tony and Casey dating, Casey brought Kaylee over a couple times a week, but it went from a couple times a week to literally not coming at all. So they didn't see Kaylee at all, but Casey always had an excuse of where she was. She would say she was with the nanny or with her parents, and so they really didn't think anything of it. They're just like, alright, like, I guess she's there. But Casey never said anything about her being missing, so are we surprised? I mean, Casey Anthony is the mother of the year, clearly. Like, why would she say anything about her daughter being missing? She was having too much fun. She was loving it. So later on, Cindy had sat with police to explain what happened about the car. Remember the 911 call that she said smelled like dead bodies? Yeah, so she ended up talking to police about that. She ended up kind of retracting her statement about the dead bodies and saying it was really from the trash in the trunk. She was like, actually, yeah, so it wasn't dead bodies, like, it wasn't that. It was actually just a smell of rotting trash in the back. Yeah. Crazy. Crazy. It's like, seriously, like, why are you trying to protect your daughter now? Like, come on. And remember, she's an RN, like, she knows smells. If anything, she would know it over everybody. And her husband is a police officer. I think he would also know, most likely, the smell of dead bodies. So it's hard to believe that all of a sudden it's like, no, actually it's just rotting trash from the trunk. Like, that's all that it is. Like, really, Cindy, really. So the car ends up getting taken in to be searched. So detectives did smell what smelled like human decomposition. So they also said, like, yeah, it smells like dead bodies. And they brought in one of those dogs that smells for stuff like this, like dead bodies, decomposition, I think. And I think it's called a cadaver dog. Cadaver, something like that. It's one of those dogs. And the dog immediately went to the trunk of the car and just like pointed it out that this is where he smelt decomposition. So they look in the trunk and it looked like it had been vacuumed out, so almost like cleaned, and there was a stained area in the trunk itself, but the stain was the size of what could possibly be a child's body. So they ended up taking a little sample of the carpet in the trunk for testing. They also noticed that there were several hairs in the trunk, so they also took those out as well to test them out because maybe they were Kaylee's hair. So they ended up finding that there was decomposition of a body as well as strong traces of chloroform. When they had tested the hair with mitochondria, some type of mitochondria way of testing, I forget how it was, they found that this could be a form. They found that this could be from either Cindy, Casey, or Kaylee. So it could be from either three of them. I think it had something to do with, like, it could only be from the female side or something like that. So that ended up being them three. So the hair that they had found was longer than Casey's hair. I believe it was 9 inches or something, so it was longer than Casey's hair. And this piece of hair was untreated, so it had never had any hair dye or anything to it. So they knew it couldn't be Cindy's hair. So therefore, it was Kaylee's hair. The hair also had a decomposition band near the root, so when that happens, that's normally from a decomposing body. They find this in decomposing bodies, this decomposition band. So they found that as well. So they're like, yeah, it's not looking too good. So they end up getting a search warrant and search the Anthony house, where they find that on the family computer, someone was searching how to make chloroform. Cindy explained, Cindy, the mother, explained that she accidentally searched for that. She was like, yeah, well, my dog was in the backyard and he started eating the bamboo. Yeah, I wanted to make sure he was okay, so I was looking up chlorophyll, and when I was searching for chlorophyll, I accidentally clicked how to make chloroform. It's like, how did you accidentally do that? That doesn't even make any sense. The story doesn't even make any sense. Like, I don't even get that. So, investigators ended up, like, looking into it, and Cindy ended up not even being home at this time, so it would have been impossible for her to even search this, but she still said that she did. So it's proven she did not. She was not the one to search this on the computer. But once again, it seems like she's kind of trying to protect Casey. So Cindy and George end up visiting Casey many of times in jail. On one specific visit, Cindy started crying to Casey, saying that someone had told her that Kaylee was dead. And so Casey's like, surprise. What a weird response from a mother whose child is missing. Like, is that not? That's so weird. So Casey tells a cryptic message to her parents during this as well, and she's like, so I kind of need to tell you guys something, but I know that this is recorded Cindy is like, what is your gut telling you? And Casey said, well, I just feel like she's not far. Like, I can feel it. I feel like she's close by. Later, investigators end up identifying the crucial witness, Zanita Gonzalez. Zanny, they're like, we found her, so we're gonna bring her in. The only, like, discrepancy, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but the only difference was this lady was a middle-aged woman, and it wasn't a young woman as Casey had described to them. So, basically, Zanita was asked, like, hey, do you know Casey or Kaylee Anthony? She's like, no. They're like, have you ever babysat for them? Nope. And basically this lady had nothing to do with the case. This poor lady got dragged through the mud, right? Like, this poor lady, she's probably like sitting at her house like, what? How did I get dragged into this? Yeah, no, she had nothing to do with this case. It was all a lie. And so they were like, yeah, no, I'm pretty positive Casey killed her daughter, because they're like, this is just like, it's just continuous lying, continuous being proved to be a lie. Like, it's just like, what is going on? Like, it just didn't make sense. So on December 11th of 2008, so this is nearly 6 months after Kaylee's disappearance, the search ended in a really disappointing way. Basically, a utility worker, his name was Roy, he found a small, badly decomposed body in a wooded area less than 1 mile away from the Anthony home. And do you remember when Casey, while talking to Cindy and George in jail, was like, I have a feeling that Casey's close by? And the body actually was close by, only a mile away. I found that to be a little suspicious too. So, DNA tests confirmed that the remains found were of those of the 2-year-old Kaylee Anthony. She had been dead for months, and her body had been hidden in a trash bag. They additionally found duct tape, I believe it was hanging from hair on her skull. They also found other bones nearby, and they found a baby blanket with Winnie the Pooh and Piglet on it. There was also a laundry bag as well, or a canvas type bag. I believe that had the blanket in it, but all this stuff was in the area. So Roy had previously called police months prior to this incident, and basically saying like, hey, I think there's something weird in these woods, and nothing ended up coming from it. So thank God, at least this time, they ended up actually seeing the bones and the skull and everything else. So, but this poor guy had been calling numerous times with nothing, and he just like couldn't. I felt like he probably like couldn't live with himself. Like, he was just like, I know. He had a feeling. Like, he was probably just like, I know that something is weird about what I saw, and he ended up being right. So he was a huge part in the case, because without him constantly calling, without him seeing that and being there that day, they would have never probably found Kaylee. So the police then get another warrant, I believe. I don't know if this is a second warrant or it's the same warrant. There's so much information on this case, so please also research it on your own. I advise that there's so much information, and I was doing my best to piece everything together. So I believe there was a second warrant, but it could have been the same warrant where they found the other stuff. But they get another warrant to search the Anthony house, where they find that Kaylee's bedroom had a Winnie and Pooh theme, and they also had found that the laundry bag, or like that canvas bag that they found in the woods, comes in a pair. So like when you buy it, it automatically comes in a pair. And at the Anthony family house, they had the other part, like the just one of the laundry bags that would pair with the laundry bag found in the woods. So everything was correlated, you know. So they end up getting a jury together May 9th of 2011. So this is like 2 years later. No, 3. Because that was like 2008, 2011. Wow. So the jury selection began in May 9th, 2011. But because the case was so mainstreamed and all over the news, and it was just an uproar, especially in Orlando, Florida, they got jurors elsewhere. So they got them to like fly out to Orlando, I believe. They got them from Pinellas County. Now, I don't know exactly where that is. I don't know if that's in Florida, but it said they got them from Pinellas County. But when I was watching the documentary series, it said they flew them out. So I'm assuming that's probably like a far distance from Orlando. So the panel itself had 9 women and 8 men, and the trial took 6 weeks. So it was a 6-week-long trial, and all jurors were not allowed to get information anywhere besides the courtroom, which is pretty standard. Like if you've ever done jury duty, you're not supposed to like read things on the internet or have any sort of bias. You're only supposed to get your information from the courtroom itself. So I mean, that just makes sense. But so on May 24th of 2011, Casey Anthony's murder trial begins. The trial became a media circus, drawing millions and millions of viewers to their television screens. The prosecution presented compelling evidence with a history of lies, weird behavior, and, just evidence that Casey was the person who killed Keely Anthony, her daughter. So basically, prosecutors were saying that Casey had used chloroform to put Keely to sleep. Basically, it was almost like her way. They were saying that it's her way of kind of like letting Keely die in a less bad way. I don't know how to word it, but like not as, I don't know. So anyways, prosecutors were saying that Casey used chloroform to put Casey to sleep first, and then she put a big piece of duct tape around her nose and her mouth so that she wasn't able to breathe anymore. It blocked all of her breathing passages. Why is that a hard word to think of? Anyways, so basically she put tape, they believe she put tape around her nose and her mouth so she wasn't able to breathe and she would suffocate. Then when she died, she was wrapped in that Winnie the Pooh, whatever, in that blanket, right? That was alleged to be her favorite blanket. And she took the body and she put it in the trunk, and she just left her in the trunk. She went to her boyfriend's house, left the body still in the trunk. She stayed at the boyfriend's, and then they believe that the next day she ended up disposing of the body in the woods. So the defense was now like, okay, we gotta raise like some type of reasonable doubt to get ourselves out of this, right? So they started questioning the reliability of the evidence and claiming that actually the little girl's death was accidental, and they were basically saying that no, she actually drowned in the family pool. The storyline goes that the defense's storyline goes that George and Casey were home. They were looking for Kaylee around the house, and George ends up going outside he's like, your mother is never gonna forgive you, and we need to figure this out. And so he was like, I'm gonna go dispose of the body. So defense was saying that George would, when, you know, Casey was growing up, would do the same type of method to childhood pets. So meaning when the childhood pet would pass away, he would wrap them up in plastic bags and dispose of the body. And so they were trying to pin it on George, like, actually it's George, he's the one that, you know, did all of this. It has nothing to do with Casey. Like, Casey didn't dispose of the body. She was no part of this. Like, the kid drowned in the pool and it wasn't her fault, and George took care of it. Like, it's like, come on. The defense was also trying to explain Casey's lies, and so they kind of had to think of a way to do that. So then they said that Casey had been, you know, a liar because she was taught to lie by her own father, George, at a very young age. They were saying that George sexually abused Casey as a kid, and that he would tell her, like, you know, she had to lie about it. And so she, just as a little girl, just always thought to lie about things and, you know, cover things up and, you know, whatever, act like everything's okay. And so that's why she was acting like this in this situation, because, you know, George, it's like, geez, you're just blaming your father for everything. Like, take some accountability. Now, I will say, who's to say that this is true or not? Like, I don't know if there's any actual evidence on how to prove if he did or did not. Like, I can't say that. It's believed that this is not true, but who's to say, right? Like, we don't know if this is true. They end up putting George on the stand and kind of asking him, like, hey, did you do this to your daughter? And he denies it. He's like, I never did that, and I was never home when Kaylee died. Like, I wasn't home that day, and that just didn't happen. So defense then also brought up that George had attempted to end his own life, and that's a really sore subject for George. So they did it obviously intentionally, but they basically were like, hey, asked George, and they're like, so is it true that you attempted to end your life? And he was like, yes I did. George had ended up disappearing for a couple weeks to a hotel when Keely had gone missing, like a couple weeks after. And so he ended up taking pills and alcohol and all, just doing a bunch of stuff. And he wrote letters to his family basically explaining that he misses Kaylee a lot, and he's gonna go meet back up with her. George really just ended up wanting to be with his granddaughter, and he just believed that he had failed her. But the defense was trying to use this as a way to spin it onto George and show that he was the one that was guilty. They were trying to say, like, oh, well, see, look, he wasn't able to live with the guilt. I don't know why they were trying to pin it on George, but they did. So, after weeks of testimony, the jury had discussed for more than 10 hours, and on July 5th of 2011, the verdict was read aloud in a packed courtroom that Casey Anthony was found not guilty. I heard that right. She was not guilty of first-degree murder. She was, though, guilty for 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. So this verdict shocked the nation. While the jury believed that Casey was guilty of lying to police and not being truthful about what had happened, they ultimately did not have enough evidence to convict her of murder. The emotional and public backlash was pretty immediate. Like, once they heard that, it was an uproar. 17th of 2011 after having served nearly 3 years in custody awaiting trial. Despite being acquitted of murder charges, she was indeed left to live with the stigma of her daughter's death and the surrounding controversy. So after, she got out of prison or jail, after she got out of jail, I never heard anything about Casey Anthony, and I kind of never saw anything about her. I think that she kind of went like undercover and just hid low and just stayed away. But recently, which is kind of how the case has resurfaced, is in March of 2025, Casey Anthony posted a TikTok kind of like rebranding as a legal advocate, and she quotes says, "My goal is to continue to help give a voice to people, to give people tools and resources that they can utilize." So how do you guys feel about her return to the world? Do you believe that Casey Anthony should be able to restart? It's been years. She was proven not guilty. Like, should we let it go? Or are we still claiming her to be America's most hated woman? I want to know your thoughts below, so let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for tuning in to this true crime episode. Don't forget to